Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to first thank you for joining us today. We're overwhelmed by the number of folks who had interest in joining us today, and we're really excited. We know there are a lot of demands on your time, especially this time of year, and so we're grateful for you joining us today for our member briefing. I'm Jeff Ray. I'm the President CEO here at the Chamber, and the Chamber continues to work on your behalf throughout this year, and we've found member briefings to be one of those great ways that we can connect with you in a variety of different ways and keep you updated on timely things that are happening. And similar, our networking at lunch, this event has been aimed at still keeping you in touch. You know, historically, we like the ability to get together in a room and connect, and obviously that doesn't make sense right now in the midst of the pandemic. So we still want to bring you some great folks, and we have a great one today with the mayor, and I'll introduce the mayor in a second. I want to mention, so we can't do the things we do at the Chamber without terrific partners. And one of those terrific partners is the team over at Gibson. And Gibson has teamed up with us this year to be our Networking at Lunch sponsor. And so I want to turn over to Becky Beckman from Gibson for just a quick welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I've really appreciated working with you this year. And though we had to move to a virtual format, I think it's been really informative. And we're just glad that we're able to be a good partner to the Chamber and offer this kind of content to all of our members in the community. So thanks for letting us be a part of it. And we look forward to a great 2021 as well.
Great, thank you, Becky. Really appreciate the partnership there and all that Gibson does, not only for us, but for so many of our members that are with us today. You're a terrific role model for other companies, and we're grateful for that partnership. So we have invited a special guest. Mayor James Mueller is going to join us today for some conversation. Many of you have got to know the mayor over the last year, and previous to that in his roles with the city. We found him to be a terrific champion for our area, a bright and dynamic leader, somebody who's assembled a phenomenal team over at the city and continuing some of the great progress that's happened over there. And the mayors have traditionally been some of our more popular guests at these kind of events, just to kind of get a snapshot of what's going on at the city. So we've invited the mayor to join me for a quick conversation. I stayed up all night preparing a hard list of questions for him to fire his way during the session. So Mayor, I believe you're on. How about if I turn over to you real quick just for a quick hello?
All right, good afternoon, Jeff, and all of the Chamber members for joining us. I appreciate it, and I didn't realize there were going to be difficult questions thrown my way. But as mayor, that's a hazard of the job, that whether you're at the grocery store or wherever, you have to expect difficult questions coming your way. And I guess I just also say that it's difficult to think that it's been almost a year in office already. Now just a few weeks to go to hit the year mark, and what a year it's been. And just, to remind people of where we were, at the beginning of the year, we had put forth quite a detailed plan on the campaign trail last year that focused on reforming public safety, investing in our next chapter of neighborhoods and our infrastructure, roads in particular, and then really drive the growth and the inclusive growth agenda. And that would also includes working with our schools in a way. Obviously, the dealing with a global pandemic was not on the short list of things to tackle in 2020, but that's taken up a lot of time. So I'm sure there are questions that you have there, and if not, we can expand on any of those points later in the conversation.
Great, thanks, Mayor, and again, thanks for joining us, and especially thank you for your leadership in what's been some of the most trying times for our communities. Not only a global health crisis, but a global economic crisis as well too. So many folks on the call today want to chat a little bit more just to kind of about how things are going. Feel free to use the chat function to jot some questions down. I've got some questions just for discussion with the mayor, and then we'll also try to get to your questions as well throughout that. So Mayor, we don't want to spend the whole time talking about COVID, but obviously it's the big news story of the year. and you have been on the really on the front lines of preparing the community for this and kind of devising, how we respond and such. So give us just kind of some assessment on COVID over the last year and its impacts on the city.
Yeah, it's been the big news story of the year and been driving a lot of what's been going on, not just locally but nationally and internationally. And we it's unfortunately this global crisis seemed to be pushed farther and farther down the levels of government. So first from the federal government level to the states, and then the states increasingly pushed it down to the local leaders and health officials in particular. And that's a lot. We have a good health office here in St. Joseph County, but that's a lot to be putting on counties across the country in terms of managing this crisis. So, one of the challenges in particular is that our government is not all unified at the local level. Just there's a county government, there are multiple cities, there are townships. And so that made it, early on, we identified that as a major challenge of coordination. And we decided to come up with a COVID-19 coordinator, response coordinator position. And your the head of your organization, Jeffrey, jumped at the opportunity to take that on. And so that's been a tremendous help, because the early days of calling, we'd had to call everyone, the county commissioners, Mayor Wood in Mishawaka, the health officials, and it just was not streamlined in terms of getting everyone on the same page. So having this coordinator role and Jeff filling that, he sits in on the health officials unified command meetings that were every day, and then they went to every other day, I believe, but they may be back to every day now. So he's there, and he makes sure that he's in contact with all the elected officials, that we're all trying to figure out how we get on the same page. And so that's the early days of the response. We basically didn't have much of a spike in the first wave that you saw in New York and across the country. And then our first real wave kind of came in the July period, post July 4th parties, really. And then it's just kind of, we would come up and then we would go down, but we never went down to a place where it wasn't just a lingering threat ready to take off at any time. And then, of course, over the past couple months, it's taken off here and regionally and across the country. So just on the public health side, that's been what we've been doing. But there's good news around the corner. The vaccines are going to be deployed here hopefully before the end of the year, and by midsummer, they're hoping that it would be widespread and we'd be back to close to normal as possible. So we've gotten through that. Then, of course, there's the economic side, and I'm sure you have questions there. So even though we're not in the full recovery phase yet, because we're not past the public health crisis fully, there's been a lot of economic work that has to go on in parallel with the public health work.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for the confidence that you've placed in me to be part of that discussion each day. I sit with the two hospitals, with South Bend Clinic, with the health department, and I've had a chance to work closely with Commissioner Castellani, Mayor Mueller, Mayor Wood, and I think that for the folks on the call, you're very fortunate, because I think we have a great team here locally, kind of attacking the different elements of the virus. And I think if you ask the folks downstate, they would say we have one of the better efforts in Indiana to be coordinated here locally. So Mayor, to stay on the crisis for a second. So crisis sometimes bring out the best in people and the worst in people. What are you most proud of, in terms of how people in the community have stepped up during this time of need?
Well, I'm very proud, as always. Our community is very generous in those folks who need help, and from whether it's from food distribution, housing, and other issues, the community continues to step up in support of residents in need. So that's that's a big plus. And, there's been comments about and a political divide over masks. And, I do believe overall, St. Joseph County has had a better record on mask wearing than some other counties. So that's all been critical to helping get through this. But I mean, the proudest moment for all of us was in the beginning of this crisis. We've known that we've been a divided country for quite some time, and there was a moment there, March and April, where the phrase "we're all in this together" truly rang true. And what you saw there, and I had worked in the Senate for a number of years, and I couldn't believe how fast the CARES Act got passed with bipartisan support. And that's what we need to see in times of crises as a country. People coming together, forgetting all of the political. We're all Americans, and just coming together and figuring out. And that was a hopeful moment. That despite all of the partisanship that exists, we were still able to come together. Although obviously that didn't last as long as we had hoped. But there was that moment where we came together. And I mean, the CARES Act was an ambitious piece of legislation that, for the most part, did its job. And now we're hoping that we can rekindle that spirit and get some further packages through in the coming months.
So, Mayor, in the next 10 days or so, we're going to start to see the first pieces of the vaccine in our community with some healthcare workers and such. We don't think it'll be widely ready for distribution, though, well into the spring and maybe late spring even of next year. So it sort of leaves a lot of our folks wondering about like the next couple of months and so what advice would you have for folks for this period of time between December 8th and when we really start to get our arms around things with a mass virus or vaccine distribution in the spring?
Well, we as we've been saying, and it feels like a broken record, we have a joint press conference every couple of weeks, and we have to stay vigilant, and we're still close to the worst we've been all year in terms of number of cases here locally. And so this has a chance to get away from us at any time. Whenever we didn't bring it all the way down, it had a chance. That's why we were continuing. There was a moment there in the summer and then early fall where it seemed like, oh, we can just keep opening up and keep doing more things, and the virus never takes off. But the risk was always there, and that's why we were there. Sometimes, especially during the summer months, it felt like we were screaming to an empty room. But so this is still a very dangerous time. And we know there's also mental health, the toll of all of this isolation and these practices, social distancing, has taken a toll, and we know that people are fatigued and weary, but vaccines are around the corner. And if we can get through the next 2 to 3 months, then the weather will start getting nice again. You can start opening up, but it can't just be a floodgate, because we'd have another wave in the springtime. But the idea that we just get through, winter months are tough. The days are dark, literally, and the weather is freezing cold here. But we get through these next couple months, the weather gets warmer, it gets lighter, and by the time we get to summer, we should be back as close to normal as possible. So I guess the message is, let's just, double down, stay the course, and brighter days are ahead.
Great, thanks, Mayor. So I want to think back to even the last few years. South Bend's had some nice momentum, sort of pre-pandemic, and obviously hopes to, I think, and some of that has continued during the pandemic, and hopes to, regain afterwards. We figure your crystal ball is clearer than anybody else's, and so why not talk a little bit about, kind of as we come out of the pandemic. And what starts to happen with the economy next summer and fall, and maybe even what lessons have we learned from the pandemic that maybe even help us really excel post-pandemic?
That's quite a crystal ball. I mean, unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, the crystal ball depends a lot on what Congress does, and if anyone can predict what Congress is or isn't going to do, that's challenging. But the like I said earlier, the CARES Act was a tremendously successful piece of legislation. Our economy went off a cliff. And then here locally, just to back up, 2019 was a great year, particularly for downtown South Bend. And starting off the year here, we had the Lion King downtown. There were every expectation that 2020 was going to be even better than 2019, which was a great year for us. So we started out with high hopes and great expectations, and really, the sky is the limit in terms of where we could head over the coming years. So that's still where we feel we can get to after we get out of this, but it really depends on how we get out of this. So the CARES Act was great. The growth, both nationally and here, we were starting to tick back up to where we were. And then September, October timeframe, the recovery kind of stalled. And that's where we sit until there's further action by Congress. And so, we're trying to do everything we can do to weather the storm here locally, but the levers of funding come from at the national level, and we just really need to hope that somehow they find a way to get past all of the different issues that they have. And I know it feels a little cynical, but we're going to hear more about deficits starting next month as soon as the transition occurs than we've heard over the past 4 years. And deficits are something we got to manage, but it's going to be hard to take when there was record deficit spending over the past 4 years and not a peep about deficits. So we can't let deficits become the boogeyman that prevents us from doing what we need to do to get the economy back on track.
Mayor, do you think obviously we've watched what's happened with the pandemic in big cities and maybe some of the challenges with supply chain and such. Does a community the size of South Bend present some real opportunities as companies are rethinking their strategies in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, just if you look broadly at the trends here, the coast, the bigger cities, the pandemic has exposed a lot of vulnerabilities for living in the largest cities. And if you think of our economic growth over the past few decades, a lot of it, or nationally, a lot of it has been driven by, the largest metropolitan areas in the country. And so between, the pandemic, also the tax reform bill a few years ago does incentivize or disincentivizes some of the economic conditions of those larger cities. So there are a lot of larger forces here that are pushing both people and then businesses, because businesses these days follow talent and people for the most part. So there's a lot more forces at play now that are pushing to places like the South Bend and other Midwestern Rust Belt cities that are we're primed to take advantage of what we've been able to accomplish and continue that and really take it to the next level. That's always been the last 8-10 years we turned the corner on declining population, but it's 0.6% or so over a number of years, and that's not a thriving that's not a sign of a thriving growth. You'd like to see that at least every year, that kind of percentage increase. So that's I think the opportunity that we have before us, and we've got to all work together to make that happen.
Great. So I'm going to stay on the kind of the economic growth discussion here for a second. You've brought Santi Garces back to the city to head your community investment department. That's something you're very familiar with, given some previous roles there with the city. What would you say are some of the top priorities for Santi and the city on the community investment side of things?
Well, and this is really, you got to take a step back and look at where we've come from and where we need to go. So, I think of it in terms, as a politician, I guess you think of things in political terms, but Mayor Pete's first term, there was a big push to just get a spark going, just doing everything you can to start getting some momentum. And then in the second term, really able to start leveraging more of that activity that had started and start getting moving in the same direction. But what we have, once we get out of this pandemic, so the first and foremost, Santi's going to be leading our recovery efforts here. And we were glad that the team was able to get a $7.7 million. You actually, Jeff, you sit on the IRF board as well for us. But our revolving loan fund, we had managed it in such a way over the past 3 or 4 decades that we were at the top of the line for the CARES Act funded EDA program for further revolving loan fund. So we were fortunate enough to get a $7.7 million grant from EDA to really supersize our loan fund, and that's something we're going to be looking to deploy here in first of the year. So that's the recovery is the first priority, and then in terms of continuing the progress that we've been making on what we would call the reurbanization of South Bend, the urban core, continue what we've been able to do there, but then also make sure that we have housing in our neighborhoods, and we are able now to take strategic looks at what sectors do we have opportunities in to bring jobs and in many ways, like we said before, jobs are following talent. So how do we build up talent in some key areas that would then be attractive for employers to be here?
Mary, you mentioned the IRF fund. Just maybe kudos to the city over the years, about $5 million of seed money in that originally, and about $42 million loaned out over time. And so a real credit to sort of the great management and such of that program. And now to infuse this new dollars available to local businesses growing to expand. I really appreciate the city's vision and seeking that extra dollars to help on that. Let's talk maybe geography a little bit, a couple different parts of the city. You touched just briefly as we were beginning about downtown, and so and obviously people often think of downtown as being the health of the downtown is often a good sign of the health of your community. A lot of activities happened down there in the last couple of years. Just give us maybe a state of where you see the downtown at today, and maybe anything that should be on the horizon for the future that we should know about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, downtown, like I said, Lion King in the spring, like before COVID-19, downtown was in midst of a takeoff, and I think the sky was the limit. Our downtown and like urban areas across the country, COVID-19 has just devastated them in many ways. So, and we have data to back that up too. There's, if you look at retail spending, our downtown's been the hardest hit percentage-wise relative to, where spending was last year. So, that's going to be a big part of the recovery, is making sure our downtown can weather the storm and then ready to move to the next level and continue the growth that we had seen. But the fundamentals are there, and we'll continue to support building that up. And I once we get through this, I believe we'll continue to see that growth trajectory.
Great. So talk a little bit, you mentioned talent, and I'd love to just spend a second, talking about the attraction of talent. And the city's made major investment in quality of place, kind of investments, things like Howard Park and others. And just, can you touch a little bit on just the, I'd say that the chief concern, if I posed a question to the people that are on the call with us today, is finding the talent they need in their organization. So talk a little bit about, kind of the role the city is trying to play in terms of helping bring that talent here.
Right. So, I mean, if you're a talented individual, you could, in some ways, you can choose where to live. And so, first and foremost, we have to make our community a good place to live and work. So that's where a lot of the placemaking activities over the past few years have been focused, and why we need to continue to make those investments. And again, I know that the chamber, Jeff, as a leader downstate, you're championing state funding for those types of programs, and we need to continue to leverage our relationships downstate too, to make those investments possible. So placemaking is absolutely critical. But then in terms of the pure economic development, so with the return of Santi Garces and the community investment role, he was actually the visionary behind our Technology Resource Center over there at Ignition Park. And so trying to figure out how do we build the technical capacity in our workforce here locally. And as well as now with community investment, we've had a workforce development program for a number of years now, and trying to figure out how do we target this more strategically into the sectors where this could lead to us capturing a piece of a growing market, and then being able to attract the employers, or in many ways hoping that the fostering entrepreneurship, that we'll have some homegrown companies succeed and take off as well.
Mary, you mentioned Ignition Park and your investment down in that area. Obviously, that's been on the radar for quite some time, and there's been some great projects happening there. Can you just speak a little bit to that? I'll call it maybe the Studebaker building and sort of that neighborhood, and just kind of the maybe the economic activity happening in and around that area?
Well, we kind of consider the from Ignition Park to Innovation Park up in the Northeast as an innovation district. So our certified technology park is dual site. So that's different than a lot of technology parks across the state. So Ignition Park and Innovation Park are kind of the two anchors of that district. And then what's going on at the Studebaker, the owner of the Studebaker, Kevin's called it the Renaissance District. So, that evokes what we're trying to achieve, is really bring back the flourish of activity in that's really a central part of downtown. There's our bus transit system is a couple blocks away from the Studebaker building. We have our Four Winds field that has made tremendous progress over the past decade, and so a lot of activity moving in there. One of the challenges that we faced is our innovation district is so geographically spread out. I mean, just imagine if all of that activity was more concentrated in one area, and then we were growing out from that, as opposed to kind of different things happening in each different segment. So there's a lot of room to grow. And so it's just, we're not able to take advantage of quite the same multiplying effects of if all of these things were closely located together.
Great. Why don't, as you mentioned, sort of Innovation Park, Ignition Park, we've heard a lot in recent years about the University of Notre Dame, new technology happening out there, the businesses that would spin off from the research that was happening on campus. Can you give us just maybe an update on the impacts that we maybe have felt over the last couple of years, or are feeling from investments in Innovation Park, Ignition Park, or that really the technical sectors that are evolving out of the university?
Yeah, I mean, so if you just take a look, go look at Ignition Park. Catalyst One is full of various entities that started there at Innovation Park. And then if you take a look at the university's research spending over the past decade, it's been increasing at a significant rate. That you've also seen this in the number of patents and startups that are forming at Innovation Park. I'd say the first wave of businesses, we ran into a challenge of when a successful business is ready to expand, you need access to talent and you need access to financing. And, at that time, we didn't have all that infrastructure built around here locally. So some of the companies would then move out, away from South Bend, even though they were formed here. So that's the key, is finding the talent base to be able to keep those growing companies here, as well as making sure that we have access to the higher risk capital to really take chances on these businesses.
Great. Mayor, I want to move west, briefly, and really talk about the west side, or that area just sort of immediately west of downtown, and some would argue that it's needed some attention over the years and such. So just talk about these investments in let's say the downtown areas and such, and how you hope those spread out into the neighborhoods around it, or influence, I guess, what's happening in the neighborhoods of the city.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of, as we grow back into our city, we're still down from our peak population. So our city, in many ways, the footprint is larger than the amount of residents that we need. But as we achieve that growth that we want, there's a lot of great opportunity. So if you think of just the few blocks west of where I am right now, the County City building, there are a lot of vacant lots, and being that close to the urban core, tremendous opportunity here in the coming 5-10 years to build that out. But then you also take a look at similarly the southeast portion of downtown, and where Prescaney is moving from their current spot over to Ignition Park. That will open up. The post office has for the most part already left that big parcel of land. And so there's a lot of opportunity in the southeast part of downtown as well. So, that's what we hope by bringing growth and re-energizing the urban core, is that we really can rebuild not just the core itself, but have it expand out into the neighboring neighborhoods as well.
Great. Mayor, if we're continuing to move west a little bit, and I think about all the attention that Blackthorn has received over the years, or even a little bit farther north at Cleveland and Brick and Dillon Drive or something, give us just kind of an update on sort of those geographic areas and what you've seen happen up in those parts.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you actually look at the levels of investment over the past decade, other than up by campus and downtown, that Portage Prairie, or up there in the far northwest corners of the city limits, that's where the most investments happen, and a lot of jobs have been generated there, and primarily taking advantage of the proximity to the toll road and building out distribution centers. So that's the positive news. There's a lot of investment, a lot of jobs, and whenever there's growth, there are challenges in integrating that growth into what had been there. And so we do know, and Jeff, I believe you live in that area, that the traffic, when you hear about traffic concerns, in some ways for us, that's a good sign, because it means something's happening and there's been growth. But we know there's a lot of challenges now with figuring out the infrastructure to meet the speed at which the growth is occurring.
Great. Mayor, I want to shift away from projects for a second and move to something you touched on briefly earlier, related to schools. And so the health of a school system is critical to the health of a community. The South Bend school system has got a lot of attention in the last year with the referendum request, with the development strategic plan. Talk a little bit about just maybe the city-school relationship and kind of what you're hoping for from South Bend schools.
Yeah, and some of this played out in the media as well, particularly at the beginning of the year. So, the referendum was on the ballot, what was the May primary, but ended up being June 2nd. And, there, obviously we've got to support our public schools, and we've had a lot of conversations about this. How do we transform them and get them to where they need to be? But we didn't have that roadmap at the beginning of the year. So there was the question of the schools asking taxpayers to pay more without being able to share the full plan of how this was going to play out. And so I shared, healthy skepticism about, we need to have a plan before you go. You can't just ask for a blank check to voters and taxpayers. Over the course of many months, we had a lot of dialogue, and there were commitments made on looking at an efficiency study. So figuring out how can they make their operations more efficient, how can they reduce the size of their footprint to match their enrollment numbers. And they also have been working on a strategic plan to advance the school system. So ultimately, as you know, I ended up supporting the referendum, and I know probably a lot of members on this call were not ready to support a referendum at the time, and I understand that point of view, and something I even shared. But the critical piece about this referendum was, if it had failed, it would have been, particularly on the operations side, it would have been disastrous in terms of what needed to happen in terms of cuts, at least in the near term, until they were able to secure more stable funding. So in some ways, for whatever reason, the school corporation got into a position where it really was a make or break moment. And that's ultimately why I supported the referendum for the primary. And now, and they made commitments on how they were going to approach spending the capital dollars as well as the operational dollars, and that's playing out right now. So there were some school board elections this fall, and I understand you can't do difficult things when folks are on the ballot. And fortunately, for the most part, there has been continuity on the school board after November's elections. But now that the elections are over, now the referendum's over and the elections are over, now it is incumbent on us to make sure that they have a plan and they follow through with the plan. And so that's what 2021 offers us and we need the business community involved in this to help push where we need to go, because this is really going to be all hands on deck to keep that level of accountability to how spending goes.
Great. Mayor, thanks for your perspective there and for your leadership on those important issues. That's one of those interesting ones where the mayor really doesn't have any say on anything related to schools, but the success and health of the schools are intricately tied to the health and success of the community. And so we appreciate you being a great leader on that, and are grateful also for the superintendent and his willingness to work and drive a few of those things forward, like the efficiency study and the strategic plan. And so we're excited that things are starting to head in the right direction. And we know a lot of that is because of your influence there too, helping to make sure it moves in that direction. So thank you for doing that. Let's shift for a second. For a decade, we've been hearing a little bit about local budgets and the potential impacts, fiscal health of our local communities. There was worry amongst taxing units about property tax caps and what that might mean, and what kind of draconian cuts might happen after that. Talk a little bit about just sort of the state of the fiscal condition of the city right now.
Yeah, that's a wild card. Like everything, COVID-19 introduces more uncertainty than we had before. But we came into, so this was the year where the final property tax cap implementation went into effect for St. Joseph County. And so there were, and a lot of this, if you take a look at where that came from, it was exempted debt from different jurisdictions. And where most of the debt was coming from was from the school system. And so the reason why the timing of the referendum happened this year was due to the fact that they lost that piece, and then all the jurisdictions were competing within the same cap for the same resources, and so that led to a drop in the county, the cities, all of the entities that receive property taxes, and so that has been that was anticipated. There were maybe some structural budget issues, but nothing so crazy, at least from the city of South Bend. We're talking about a couple $1 million of the general fund. It hit the redevelopment funds because it's all property tax based. So it did reduce the amount of impact we could have from the redevelopment fund side of things. But from the general operational funds, it's a couple $1 million, which out of our budget. So our total budget with utility is over 300 million. But when you look at just our operations dollars minus the utility revenues, it's closer to 100 million. And so, if you think of $1 million or $2 million, it's a couple percent. We can figure that out for the most part, especially if we continue to see growth and valuations going up to match the level of growth and investment going on. So I would say that South Bend was pre-COVID was in a very strong position, very healthy reserves, AA bond rating. There are some things. There are challenges we've got to address, but nothing crazy in that terms. I know the county budgets in the city of Mishawaka may be strained slightly more than the city of South Bend, but I feel very good about our finances pre-COVID. With COVID-19, again, this is all dependent on how the macro economy goes, but as long as we don't fall off a cliff or Congress does what they need to do to keep our recovery going, we won't expect to see a big hit to property tax valuations. So property taxes should remain relatively stable. The big piece the two big pieces that we got hit on were hotel motel tax, which is the countywide, because the hospitality industry and tourism industry has been decimated by COVID-19. So big hit there. And then income taxes due to all the unemployment and people out of work. That remains to be seen. How quickly do we rebound? Getting back to what we would consider full employment. Those hits, because of the way the timing structure, won't actually hit us till 2022. But we made out in this year's budget, we made some projections, and again, it's dependent on how quickly you think the economy is going to rebound. But we base it off of, I forget which, it's one of the Bloomberg philanthropies groups. They did macroeconomic projections for different regions, us included, and they thought we were going to be in between. They did 6 different recovery scenarios, and we really focused in on 2. And so far, our recovery has tracked in between those 2. So the good news is what we baked into the budget projections over the next 3 years was assuming that we were going to be in between those 2 scenarios. And up until the last month or so, that's where we've been. Now we have the potential to either go down or, hopefully continue the uprise, going back up. But that's, like I said, just beating a drum here. Congress has to do something, and hopefully they will.
Great. Mayor, we certainly see a lot of the stuff you're working on covered in the news and such, but is there something this group should know more about, something that you're excited about that maybe hasn't gotten enough attention, a project, a program, anything that I think that again, a group like this should know more about, but maybe hasn't heard much about because of the pandemic in the news or other things?
Well, yeah, and we hope to bring this up starting the new year, a bigger conversation on this. But really, we've been working on a comprehensive strategy for our roads, our road infrastructure. I heard it last year knocking on doors that it was a top issue for voters. We've done community surveys, and again, roads is one of the biggest pieces. And so really, we're going to make a big push on infrastructure. It's baked into the budget that we passed, and I don't think that got the full appreciation. But and then maybe another piece is on the gun violence. We started a new group this year, led by Mo Scott, in a position called Director of Community Initiatives, and they're about to announce awardees for what they're calling Alive and Free grants, and trying to leverage different assets in the community to help us tackle the issue of gun violence. And so those are two things that we hope that there will be more attention, in the coming weeks. But as the mayor of South Bend, I don't, if people are paying attention to the news closely, I don't feel like we have a lack of visibility from this seat.
Yep. Thanks, Mayor. So, Mayor, you were involved prior to your time as mayor with the city, but now you're sitting on the other side of the table. Anything surprise you from kind of the new seat versus where you sat before that maybe you weren't expecting? Obviously, not a pandemic, of course, but what surprised you most about this new role that you're in?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise is that people want to know what I think, even if I have no actual role. Something random happens and it's like, well, what does the mayor say or think, or why isn't the mayor speaking out on this? And, I may have a lot of thoughts or opinions on a lot of things, but sometimes it's, I don't necessarily think it's as productive to wade into everything. But that's something new that I'm still adjusting to, that even if I can't do anything tangibly, or I have no actual formal role in something, people want to know, what the mayor is thinking or believes in.
Great, thanks. Mayor, I want to share a couple questions that we've been generating from the audience too, as you and I have been talking here. One, we're going to go back downtown real quick, and a question about the Liberty Tower. Obviously, it's changed significantly over the years. The outward appearance, it has improved. The aloft has moved in there. Recently, people have been seeing some activity happening on the outside. Any updates on what's going on at the Liberty Tower?
So there's the two unfinished pieces of the Liberty Tower. So three really. There's the basement space. There's the first floor on Washington Street, and then there are the upper floors. The upper floors are COVID-19 has delayed the rollout of that, but they're looking at a mix of residential and potential office. But now with COVID-19, probably mostly residential. So both rental and ownership. The first floor, I don't know the latest in terms of, I know at one point they had a couple leads on tenants, but I don't know the latest on if someone is definitely moving in there. And then the basement, they are looking at some sort of recreation, social space, I believe. So I haven't heard the latest if that's still happening, but that was the thought a couple months ago.
Great, thanks for that update. It certainly looks better, and things like the Aloft are tremendous additions here to downtown. Appreciate that. One thing on downtown's seen a lot of housing increases or housing opportunities in recent years. If there are any criticisms of that housing, it's the price point, and the desire to bring young people downtown at a price point they can afford. Talk a little bit about that battle and how you maybe accomplish both things. Get young down there, but you also get things at a price point that make it easier for folks to do that.
Yeah, I mean the housing situation is we can look at rents or we can look at incomes, and I think from a strategic standpoint, the issue isn't necessarily always the rents. It's the fact that our incomes are lower than the state average and the national average, because the cost of construction here is such that unless there's subsidy, and we do a lot of times, there are things we have to subsidize just to get it to pencil out to build. And then you'd be talking about further subsidy to bring more affordable rents. So that's something that, as we get momentum, and we don't need to we don't need a subsidy to go just to making the thing happen, and it can go toward more of these policy outcomes that we want, like affordable housing. That's something that we'll look into. But unless we can lower the cost of construction, which materials are a global market, and so that's why we need incomes to be closer to our national average to compete there. And then local labor, and we don't want to cheap out on our local labor either. So there's there got to be, something's got to give, and hopefully that our incomes and our growth trajectory will allow us to dedicate our limited funding streams toward these policy goals. But we've got to keep growth going before we can get there. And so, I understand that's something that's hard oftentimes to explain to residents. Why are you investing in this thing? It seems like, if you looked at downtown and you'd see all this investment, you'd say, why are there public resources going into this? But a lot of these things wouldn't happen without public resources because of the risk is so high. And so, until we get to that stable growth, we're going to have to continue to help that development go forward. We won't have as many resources as we'd like to these policy goals, because you can talk about affordable housing, you can talk about sustainable practices, LEED certified buildings and all of the rest, but those add more costs to develop. So we've just got to be, we want to advance those goals while maintaining our growth trajectory.
Great, Mayor. Got a question related to kind of those quality of life investments. Obviously, very grateful for your leadership and Aaron's leadership at venues, parks, and arts, and places like Howard Park are just incredible. The trails. This is more a question about the trail system and any updates on the East Bank Trail and its potential connections up with the Indiana-Michigan River Valley Trail. Any update on what's going on there?
So, I mean, I know the path was laid along the 933 corridor. That's in the county, so I don't have the up-to-date information on what's going on north of Angela. But as we come farther south, particularly by the new development across from Century Center, that's all been a tangled web of when the hydro project from the university concludes, and they're expecting to conclude by summer next year. Then it's rebuilding Sites Park on top of what was taken out for the hydro project, as well as the trail there along the riverfront. So those pieces closer to downtown should be underway next year. The farther north, we'd have to consult with the county to see where they are on that.
Great. So, Mayor, you have a captive audience, and for one last chance to maybe share any thoughts with them. Any final thoughts that you want to leave with our business leaders who have joined us this afternoon?
Well, I mean, first, I just appreciate all of the confidence in South Bend over the years, and I know that we're having some challenges right now, but the trajectory is strong, and I know that we're going to get back to those better days soon. And we've just got to figure out, how do we weather the storm together, and how do we bring what we've been able to achieve over the last decade to the next level in this decade. So appreciate everyone and look forward to working with you.
Mayor, thank you. And again, thank you for your leadership, especially during these extraordinary times. A lot of stuff that hadn't been planned for, but you've done a tremendous job leading the city, and we're grateful for that. And we're grateful for the relationship that we as a business community have been able to develop with you. And we look forward to partnering with you well into the future on so many of these key initiatives. Thanks for joining us today. We'll have you back sometime here in the future to give us a little bit of an update on how things are going.
All right. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us again. This is our last networking at lunch of the year. Again, a huge thank you to Gibson, Becky Beckman, Tim Lehman, the whole team over there for being great partners for us at the Chamber. If you have insurance needs, reach out to Becky and the team over there. They'll connect you. They're, again, a terrific resource here for our community. Encourage you to just follow what we're doing, sbrchamber.com, the best way to go, or on our social media platforms. We'll keep you updated on the important work that's happening here. And we will look forward to connecting with you again in a few weeks in this kind of format after the first of the year. But in the meantime, we'll continue to keep you updated on the things that we're doing on behalf of the business community. We're grateful for your investment and the confidence that you have in us, and we look forward to being your partner well into the new year. So have a great afternoon.